I was told to stop praying, but my prayers became the shield that saved them all. I remember the day the command was given. It wasn't shouted in a fit of rage, which might have been easier to forgive. No, it was said with a cold, clinical embarrassment that cut deeper than any knife. My daughter-in-law stood in the doorway of my small room, her designer heels clicking impatiently against the hardwood, and told me my faith was a noise pollution in her perfect life. I looked at my son, my David, hoping he would remember who prayed him through fevers and failures. But he just looked away. I didn't say a word then. I closed my Bible. But what they didn't know is that you cannot stop the wind just by closing the window. Welcome back to the front porch, my dears. Is Grandma Alice here? If you are new to the family, come on in and sit a spell. The tea is hot, and the truth is even hotter today. Before I open up the past, do an old woman a favor. Press that subscribe button. We are so close to 1,000 subscribers, and I would love to reach that milestone before next week. It would mean the world to share these lessons with more souls who need them. Now, are you listening? Good. You have to understand, child, that the house my son David lived in was a palace. It was the kind of place you see in magazines. Floors of Italian marble that were so polished you could see your own worry reflected in them, and ceilings so high that a whisper got lost before it reached the chandelier. It was beautiful, yes, but it was cold. It was a coldness that central heating couldn't fix. I had moved in 6 months prior, after my husband, God rest his soul, passed on. David insisted. He was a good boy at heart, successful in finance, walking around in suits that cost more than my father made in a lifetime. He wanted to take care of me, he said. But taking care of someone and making space for them are two very different things. And then there was Elena. My daughter-in-law was a striking woman. Sharp features, immaculate hair, and eyes that were always calculating the value of everything in the room. She wasn't evil, child. I don't believe people are born evil, but she was hollow. She had filled herself up with the world's opinions until there was no room left for spirit. To Elena, image was God, and having an old woman mumbling psalms in the guest wing didn't fit the image of a modern, power couple household. My routine was simple. Every morning at 5 a.m., before the sun stretched its arms over the city, I would wake up. I would kneel on the small rug beside my bed, the one I brought from my old cottage, worn thin at the center, and I would pray. I didn't shout. I didn't wail. I just spoke to the Lord. I prayed for David's stress, because I saw how his hands shook when he poured his coffee. I prayed for Elena's heart, because I saw how she never truly smiled, only showed her teeth. I prayed for the peace of that big, echoing house. For a while, they ignored it. I was just a shadow in the hallway, the old woman with the Bible. But the trouble started on a Tuesday. I remember because the rain was hammering against the glass, heavy and relentless. Elena was hosting a dinner party for David's business partners. These were important people, the kind who speak in millions and measure worth in assets. I had stayed in my room as was expected of me. I didn't want to intrude, but the walls in that house, for all their expense, were thin in the wrong places. As the evening went on, a heavy feeling settled in my chest. It was a burden, a spiritual weight I couldn't shake. I felt a darkness hovering over the house, specifically over David. It was a panic I couldn't explain. So I did what I have always done. I got on my knees. The burden was heavy that night, child. I suppose my voice rose a little. I wasn't screaming, but I was weeping. I was pleading for protection. Lord, cover him, I whispered. Cover this house. Do not let the enemy enter. I was so lost in the spirit I didn't hear the door handle turn. The door swung open, and the light from the hallway cut across my dark room like a searchlight. Mother! It was David. He stood there, face flushed, his tie loosened. Behind him stood Elena, her arms crossed, her face twisted in pure mortification. And behind her, peering curiously from the hallway, were two of their guests holding wine glasses. I wiped my eyes quickly, struggling to get up from my bad knees. "David? Is everything all right? Is everything all right?" Elena repeated, her voice a sharp hiss. She stepped into the room and closed the door on the guests. But the humiliation was already thick in the air. "Alice, we have investors downstairs. Serious people. And they can hear you wailing in here like we're running a revival tent." "I wasn't wailing, Elena," I said softly, gripping the edge of the bed for support. "I felt a heaviness. I was praying for you. For David." "We don't need it," David snapped. That hurt more than Elena's scorn. My boy looked at me with eyes I didn't recognize. They were tired, yes, but they were also hard. "Mom, please. It's embarrassing." One of the partners asked if someone was in pain. I had to tell them my mother is eccentric. Eccentric. I felt the word land on my chest like a stone. "Superstitious is the word," Elena corrected, walking over to my nightstand. She picked up my Bible, holding it by the corner as if it were contaminated. "Look, Alice, we appreciate that this is your hobby, but this is a modern house. We rely on strategy, on hard work, on reality, not invisible friends." She set the Bible down, not gently. "You need to stop," Elena said, her voice dropping to a command. "No more morning mumbling. No more weeping at night. If you want to live here, you need to be silent. We are trying to build a future, and you are making us look like we're living in the dark ages." I looked at David. I waited for him to defend me. I waited for him to say, "Elena, this is the woman who prayed me through law school. This is the woman who prayed when the doctors said I wouldn't walk after that crash." But David just rubbed his temples. "Just keep it down, Mom. Please. No more praying when people are home. Ideally, not at all. It's affecting the energy of the house. The energy of the house." I looked at the two of them, so tall, so well-dressed, so fragile. They thought their money was a fortress. They didn't know their fortress was made of glass. "Very well," I said. My voice was steady, though my heart was breaking. "If silence is what you want, silence is what you will get." They left the room. I heard Elena let out a sigh of relief in the hallway, heard her apologize to the guests about her confused mother-in-law. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark. I didn't pray that night. I didn't pray the next morning. I folded my hands in my lap and I respected their wishes. The silence they asked for descended on the house. For the first week, they seemed happier. Elena was cheerful, humming as she arranged flowers. David seemed relieved that there were no odd noises coming from the guest wing. They threw another party. They laughed. They toasted to their own success. But, child, there is a difference between peace and the absence of noise. Around the second week, the atmosphere began to shift. It wasn't something you could see, but something you could feel. It started with small things. The air in the house grew stale, no matter how many windows they opened. The shadows in the corners seemed to stretch a little longer than they should have. David came home one evening looking gray. "Rough day?" I asked him as he passed the kitchen. I was making tea quietly, of course. "Just a headache," he muttered, not making eye contact. "Deal with the logistics firm is hitting snags. Nothing I can't handle." He went upstairs, and I heard him pacing. Back and forth, back and forth. The rhythm of a man walking a cage. A few days later, Elena lost her diamond bracelet. It vanished from her vanity. She tore the house apart, accusing the cleaning lady, accusing the movers who brought in a new sofa. She was frantic, her face red and blotchy. "It was right here," she screamed. "This house. Everything is going wrong lately." I sat in my chair by the window, watching the leaves fall in the garden. My lips parted to whisper a prayer for her peace, to ask the Lord to reveal where the lost thing was. But I caught myself. No, I thought. They asked for silence. I closed my mouth. The weeks turned into a month. The shield they had mocked was gone. And without it, the arrows began to land. David became irritable. He snapped at Elena over dinner. Elena stopped eating. She said food tasted like ash. They fought over money, which made no sense because they had plenty of it. But fear doesn't look at bank accounts. Fear looks at the future. One night, I woke up at 3 a.m. Usually, this was my time to intercede, to stand in the gap for my family. But I remembered my promise. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The house was making noises, not the settling of wood but groans. It sounded like the house itself was in pain. I heard a door slam downstairs, then another. I put on my robe and crept out to the landing. The chandelier cast dim, ghostly light on the marble foyer below. David was standing by the front door. He wasn't wearing his suit. He was in his pajamas, barefoot, staring at the security panel. He was punching in codes over and over again, his fingers trembling. "David," I whispered. He jumped, spinning around. His eyes were wide, rimmed with dark circles so deep they looked like bruises. "The alarm," he whispered, his voice shaking. "It won't set. Keep saying, breach. Keep saying there's a breach in the perimeter." "Is there someone outside?" I asked, gripping the railing. "No," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I checked the cameras. There's no one. The grounds are empty. But the system, it says the walls are down. It says we're exposed." He looked up at me then, and for a second, I saw the little boy he used to be. He looked scared. He looked like he wanted his mother to tell him the monsters weren't real. "Go back to bed, Mom," he said, turning back to the blinking red light on the panel. "It's just a glitch. Technology acts up. I'll call the technician in the morning." I went back to my room, but I didn't sleep. I knew it wasn't a glitch. The physical alarm might have been broken, but the spiritual alarm was ringing loud and clear. The hedge of protection was down. The next morning, the sun didn't seem to rise fully. The sky was a bruised purple, heavy with a storm that wouldn't break. I was in the kitchen buttering toast when the phone rang. It was the landline, the one they kept only for emergencies. Elena was seated at the island, nursing a coffee, looking pale. David was putting on his shoes by the door. The phone rang again, loud, jarring. David stopped. Elena looked up. "Who calls the house line at 7 a.m.? Elena asked, her voice tight. David walked over and picked up the receiver. "Hello." I watched his back. I saw his shoulders stiffen. I saw the hand holding his briefcase loosen until the leather bag dropped to the floor with a heavy thud. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the distant, tinny voice on the other end of the line. David didn't speak. He just listened. And as he listened, he began to sway. "David." Elena stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "David, what is it?" He slowly lowered the phone. He turned around. His face was the color of old paper. His eyes were empty, as if someone had reached inside and turned off the light. He looked at Elena, then he looked at me. "That was the feds," he whispered. His voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. "They're at the office, and they're on their way here." "What?" Elena shrieked, clutching her chest. "For what? We haven't done anything." "They seized the accounts, Elena," David said, a tear finally tracking through the shock on his face. "All of them. It's all frozen. They said I'm being indicted for fraud. It's a mistake. It has to be a mistake." But he looked at me and his knees gave out. He slid down the cabinet to the floor, burying his face in his hands. "I can't stop it," he sobbed. "I don't have the strength to stop it." I stood there, holding my butter knife, feeling the cold draft sweep through the kitchen. The storm had finally broken into the house. The money was frozen. The reputation was ruining. The walls were down. I looked at my son, crumbled on the floor, and my daughter-in-law screaming in panic. My heart wanted to rush to them, My heart wanted to fall to my knees right there on the cold tile and call down heaven to fix this mistake, to bind this attack. But then I remembered the promise. Stop praying, they had said. It's embarrassing. I set the knife down on the plate with a soft clink. That night, as the blue lights of police cars flashed through the sheer curtains, painting the living room in chaotic bursts of color, I sat in my rocking chair in the dark. I watched the light fade from my son's eyes as they led him out the door for questioning. I knew something had changed between us forever, but what I didn't know was how deep the shadow had already crept into our home, and that this was only the first wave of the flood that was coming to drown them. When the police cars finally pulled away, dragging the red and blue chaos down the street with them, the silence that rushed back into the house was not peaceful. It was violent. It was the kind of silence that rings in your ears, louder than a scream. The front door was still open, letting in the cold night air, and my daughter-in-law, Elena, stood in the center of the foyer. She looked like a statue made of salt, stiff, pale, and ready to crumble if the wind blew the wrong way. The marble floors, usually so spotless you could eat off them, were scuffed with the muddy boot prints of officers who didn't care about the price per square foot. I stood in the shadows of the hallway, clutching my robe. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I wanted to go to her. I wanted to wrap my arms around her stiff shoulders and whisper, "The Lord is a strong tower." I wanted to fall to my knees right there in the mud and the mess and call down a peace that passes understanding. But I heard her voice in my head, sharp as a razor. Stop praying. It's embarrassing. So I stayed in the shadows. I watched the cold wind blow a stray leaf across the foyer floor. Welcome back, my dears. This is Grandma Alice. If you're just joining us, pull up a chair. The night is getting darker, and the fire is burning low, but we aren't done yet. If you haven't already, please click that subscribe button. We are building a family here, one story at a time, and I'd be honored to have you with us as we aim for 1,000 subscribers. Now, where were we? Ah yes, the silence. For the next 3 days, the house felt like a tomb. David was held at the precinct. They denied bail initially, something about him being a flight risk because of offshore accounts he swore he didn't know existed. The news channels were having a field day. The fall of the golden boy, they called it. I saw my son's face on the television screen in the kitchen, looking haggard and confused, sandwiched between a commercial for detergent and the weather report. Elena didn't eat. She didn't sleep. She paced. She spent the first day on the phone. I sat in the living room, knitting a scarf I knew no one would wear, just to keep my hands from trembling. I listened to her voice go from confident to desperate. "Cindy? Yes, it's Elena. Look, it's all a misunderstanding. Cindy, are you there? Click. Mark, please. We need a recommend for a defense attorney who handles federal. Mark? Hello? Click. One by one, the friends who had drunk their expensive wine and eaten their catered food vanished. They were like mist, child. As soon as the sun got too hot, they evaporated. I watched Elena realize, in real time, that her social standing was built on sand. She threw her phone across the room on the second afternoon. Cracked against the wall, but she didn't scream. She just slid down the silk wallpaper and sat there, pulling at her hair. I walked over. I placed a cup of tea on the small table beside her. Chamomile and honey. Drink, I said softly. She looked up at me. Her eyes were red, rimmed with dark circles. They're gone, Alice. Everyone. The club members, the partners. They won't even take my calls. Fairweather friends are like shadows. I told her, my voice calm. They only appear when you're standing in the sun. When you go into the dark, they disappear. She looked at me, waiting. I could see it in her eyes. She was waiting for me to say something spiritual. She was waiting for me to offer a platitude. Or maybe she was even secretly hoping I would offer to pray. I saw her glance at my hands, expecting them to be clasped. But I remembered the command. If you want to live here, you need to be silent. So I just smoothed my apron. Drink your tea before it gets cold, I said, and I walked away. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. To see your children suffering and not lift the shield of faith is a torture I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. But I knew that if I stepped in now, while their pride was still bruised but intact, they would never learn. They would think they fixed it. They needed to see the bottom of the well before they would look up for the rope. That night, the atmosphere in the house shifted from heavy to hostile. I went to bed at 9 p.m. I knelt by my bed out of habit, my knees finding the grooves in the rug. I looked up at the ceiling towards heaven. Lord, I thought, I am keeping my mouth shut as they asked. But you see them. You see the wolves circling. I didn't speak a word. I got into bed and stared at the dark. Around 2 a.m., the house began to groan again. It wasn't the wind this time. It sounded like footsteps. Heavy, dragging footsteps on the floor above me. I sat up. The air in my room was freezing, even though the thermostat was set to 72. I could see my breath in the moonlight. Then, a scream tore through the house. It was Elena. I didn't think. I just moved. I grabbed my cane and hurried into the hallway. The lights were flickering, actually flickering like a bad horror movie. I made my way to the master bedroom. Elena was sitting bolt upright in the massive king-sized bed, clutching the sheets to her chest. She was staring at the corner of the room, her eyes wide with terror. "Get out!" she was screaming. "Get out of here!" I stepped inside. "Elena!" She whipped her head around, her hair wild. "Alice, did you see him? Did you see him standing there?" I looked at the corner. It was empty, but the air was thick with malice. I could feel it on my skin, prickly and electric. There was something there unseen but present. A darkness that had been waiting for the hedge of protection to fall. "There is no one there, Elena," I said, though I knew that wasn't entirely true. "He was staring at me," she sobbed, trembling violently. "A man. A shadow. He was standing right there, watching me sleep. He touched my foot. It was cold like ice." She pulled her knees up, shaking. "I can't sleep in here. I can't be in this house. Feels wrong. It feels exposed." I stood at the foot of the bed. This was the moment. This was the moment where, a month ago, I would have walked over, laid my hand on her forehead, and commanded the fear to leave in the name of Jesus. I would have anointed the doorposts with oil. I would have filled the room with psalms until the darkness fled. Elena looked at me. Her eyes were pleading. "Alice," she whispered. "Do something." My heart broke. "What would you like me to do, Elena?" "I don't know," she cried. "Just, isn't there something? Make it stop. Feels like we're being hunted." I gripped my cane tighter. "You told me that you rely on reality," I said gently, though the words tasted like ash. "You told me my prayers were just noise. You told me to stop affecting the energy of the house." She flinched as if I had slapped her. "I can call the security company again," I offered, my voice flat. "Or perhaps you need a sedative. I can call the doctor." Elena stared at me, her mouth slightly open. She looked at the empty corner, then back at me. The realization hit her. She was alone, truly alone. She had silenced the watchman, and now she was surprised that the enemy was at the gate. "No," she whispered, falling back against the pillows, pulling the duvet over her head. "Just go away, Alice. Go away." I left the room. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat in the hallway chair, keeping watch with my eyes, but my lips remained sealed. 2 days later, David came home. He had been released on a massive bail bond that wiped out the last of their liquid savings. He walked through the door, but the man who entered wasn't my son. He was a shell. He had lost 10 pounds. His suit was wrinkled, his tie missing. He didn't hug Elena. He didn't hug me. He walked straight to the liquor cabinet, poured a glass of scotch, and drank it in one swallow. "They have emails," David said, his voice raspy. "Emails from my account authorizing the transfers. I didn't send them, Mom. I swear on my life I didn't send them. But they look real. The forensic guys say they are authentic." "It's a setup," Elena said, her voice shrill. She was pacing again, wearing the same clothes for the third day in a row. "Someone is framing us." "It doesn't matter." David slammed the glass down, shattering it. Shards of crystal skittered across the counter. "The assets are gone. The house. The bank is calling in the mortgage clause because of the investigation. We have 30 days, Elena. 30 days before they put a foreclosure sign on the lawn. 30 days. The castle was crumbling." "We can fight it," Elena insisted, though she sounded unsure. "With what money?" David laughed. A dry, bitter sound. "Our accounts are frozen. The lawyers want a retainer we can't pay. I'm done. It's over." He looked at me then. He looked at me with a mixture of shame and anger. "I bet you're happy," he spat out. "David!" Elena gasped. "No, let him speak," I said, standing my ground by the stove. "You always said this money was worldly," David sneered, walking toward me. "You always looked down on us for enjoying our life. You're probably thinking this is God's judgment, aren't you? You're probably thinking we deserve this." I looked my son in the eye. I didn't see a businessman. I saw a scared little boy who had scraped his knee and was lashing out at the person trying to clean the wound. "I have never rejoiced in your pain, David," I said quietly. "And I do not believe God is doing this to you. But you built a house with no doors and no locks, and you invited the world inside. Now you are surprised that thieves have come." He stared at me, breathing hard. Then his shoulders slumped. "I don't know what to do, Mom. I can't fix this. My brain won't work. It's like there's a fog in my head." "It is the fog of fear," I said. "And fear is a liar." He rubbed his face. "I'm going to the study. I need to think. Don't disturb me." He went into his office and locked the door. The day dragged on. The sun went down, bringing that suffocating darkness back into the house. Elena took a sleeping pill and passed out on the sofa. I was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters, when I felt it. A cold chill that started at the base of my spine and shot up to my neck. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the air conditioning. It was the presence of death. I dropped the dish rag. I looked toward the hallway that led to David's study. The silence coming from that room was different. It wasn't the silence of concentration. It was the silence of a void. "Go to him," a voice whispered in my spirit. I walked to the study door. "David!" No answer. "David!" "Open the door." Silence. I tried the handle. Locked. I put my ear to the wood. I heard nothing. No shuffling papers. No typing. No pacing. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced my chest. "David!" I banged on the door with my fist. "David, answer me right now." Still nothing. "Elena!" I shouted, my voice cracking. "Elena, wake up!" I didn't wait for her. I stepped back and threw my shoulder against the door. I am an old woman, child, but adrenaline is a powerful thing. The door groaned but didn't open. "David, don't you do it!" I screamed, realizing what the heavy spirit in the house had been whispering all along. "Don't you listen to that voice." I slammed against the door again, and again. Finally, Elena came running, stumbling over her own feet. What is it? Help me break it down," I yelled. Together, we threw our weight against the mahogany wood. Once, twice. On the third hit, the lock splintered, and the door flew open. The room was dark, lit only by the glow of the laptop screen on the desk. David wasn't at the desk. The French doors leading to the second-story balcony were wide open. The curtains were billowing violently in the night wind. I ran to the balcony. David was there. He was standing on the railing, his toes hooked over the edge, looking down at the concrete patio 20 feet below. His body was swaying in the wind. He looked like a man in a trance. "David!" Elena screamed, freezing in the doorway. My son didn't turn around. He just stared down into the darkness. "It's quiet down there," he mumbled, his voice carried away by the wind. "It's finally quiet." I stepped onto the balcony. The wind whipped my gray hair across my face. I was 10 feet away from him. If I rushed him, he might jump. If I screamed, he might jump. I looked at his back. I saw the spiritual heaviness sitting on his shoulders like a physical weight, pushing him down, pushing him over the edge. I knew then that I had a choice. I could keep my promise to be silent. I could respect their rules, their modern ways, their demand for dignity. Or I could save my son. I looked at Elena. She was paralyzed, her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She looked at me, and this time, there was no mockery in her eyes. There was no pride. There was only absolute, terrifying desperation. "Pray," her eyes screamed. "For God's sake, Alice, pray." I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath, inhaling the cold night air. And for the first time in a month, I opened my mouth to do what I was born to do. But before I could get the first word out, David leaned forward. "Goodbye, Mom," he whispered, and he let go of the railing. Time does not tick when you are watching your child die. It stops. When David let go of that railing, the world went silent. The wind died. The traffic noise from the city vanished. The only thing left in the universe was the terrifying sight of my son's body leaning forward into the abyss. Gravity, that cruel master, began to take him. His heels lifted from the concrete. His center of gravity shifted past the point of no return. I didn't think. I didn't plan. And I certainly didn't worry about being embarrassing. I lunged. My old joints shrieked in protest, but a strength that was not my own surged through my arms. I reached out through the balcony bars and grabbed the back of his belt just as he tipped forward. "I plead the blood of Jesus." My scream tore through the night, louder than the wind, louder than the despair that had been silencing this house for a month. David's weight hit the belt. The leather dug into my hands, burning my skin. I was pulled hard against the iron railing, the breath knocked out of me. He was heavy, child, heavy with the weight of a grown man, and heavier still with the weight of his sins. I felt my feet sliding on the slick tiles. He was going over, and he was taking me with him. "Elena!" I roared, my voice cracking with strain. "Pull him. Now!" Elena, who had been frozen in horror, finally broke. She didn't scream. She didn't run away. She threw herself at us. She grabbed David's arm, her fingernails digging into his skin, and she pulled with the hysterical strength of a wife who realizes she is 1 second away from widowhood. "David! David, come back!" she sobbed. For a second, we hung there, 3 souls balanced on the edge of eternity. David was dangling, his eyes squeezed shut, his body limp. He wasn't fighting us, but he wasn't helping us either. The spirit of death had him in a trance. "In the name of Jesus, you will not take him," I prayed, grinding my teeth against the pain in my shoulder. "I command you to loose him. Return his mind. David, wake up." I saw his eyes snap open. He looked down at the dark drop below. Then he looked up at me. His old mother, face pressed against the iron bars, holding him by a strip of leather. The trance broke. Terror flooded his face. "Mom," he gasped. "Climb," I ordered. "Climb, boy." He scrambled. His survival instinct finally kicked in. With Elena pulling on his arm and me anchoring his waist, he hauled himself back over the railing. We all collapsed onto the cold balcony floor in a heap of tangled limbs and sobbing breath. David curled into a ball, shaking so hard his teeth chattered. I didn't want to. I don't know what happened. I didn't give him a moment to rationalize it. I didn't ask if he was okay. The battle wasn't over. We had just moved from the physical to the spiritual. I struggled to my feet, ignoring the agony in my back. I pointed my cane at the open door of the study, where the darkness seemed to be pooling like black water. Get inside, I told them. Both of you. Now. They didn't argue. They didn't roll their eyes. They scrambled inside the study like frightened children. I followed them in and kicked the balcony doors shut. I locked them. Then I turned to face my son and daughter-in-law. They were huddled together on the leather sofa, looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. You told me to be silent, I said, my voice low but vibrating with authority. You told me my prayers were noise. You told me I was embarrassing you. I walked to the center of the room. But look at you, I said, gesturing to the chaos. Your money is frozen. Your friends are gone. Your peace is stolen. And the enemy almost took your life tonight. Where is your strategy now, David? Where is your reality? Elena. Elena buried her face in David's shoulder, weeping. We didn't know, she choked out. Alice, we didn't know it was real. It is real, I said. And I am done being quiet. I raised my hands. I didn't care about the neighbors. I didn't care about the police. I opened my mouth and I let the river flow. I walked through that study, praying in the spirit. I rebuked the spirit of suicide. I bound the spirit of poverty and fear. I plead protection over the windows, over the doors, over the minds of my children. The air in the room grew hot, physically hot. The heavy, suffocating pressure that had been crushing us for weeks began to lift, like smoke being sucked out of a ventilation shaft. David slid off the sofa. He fell to his knees on the Persian rug. I'm sorry, he wept, his forehead touching the floor. God, I'm sorry. I was so arrogant. I thought I built this. I thought I was the king. Elena knelt beside him. She didn't know how to pray, poor thing. She just held his hand and kept whispering, please, please, just save us. Just save us. I placed my hands on their heads. The Lord is near to the broken-hearted, I whispered. He is here. We stayed like that for hours. We didn't sleep. We kept vigil until the sun came up, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges. A promise that the night, no matter how dark, always ends. The miracle didn't happen the way they do in the movies. The FBI didn't call the next morning to say, oops, our mistake. Here is your checkbook back. No, child. Life is still life. The investigation dragged on for another 3 months. It turned out David's business partner, the one who had introduced him to the big leagues, had been skimming funds and laundering money through David's accounts. David was eventually cleared of criminal charges, thanks to the truth coming out, but the legal fees and the fines for negligence wiped them out. They lost the house. The bank foreclosed on the marble floors and the high ceilings. The luxury cars were towed away. The designer clothes were sold to pay off debts. And you know what? It was the best thing that ever happened to them. 6 months later, I sat on the porch of a small rental bungalow on the edge of town. It had peeling yellow paint and a screen door that squeaked, but it had a front yard full of wildflowers. The smell of bacon wafted through the screen. Mom, breakfast is ready, David called out. I smiled and pushed myself up from the rocker. I walked into the kitchen. It was small, tiny compared to the old one. The table was pine, scratched and sturdy. David was at the stove wearing jeans and a t-shirt. He looked different. The dark circles were gone. The frantic, hungry look in his eyes had been replaced by a calm, steady light. He was working a regular job now, managing a small branch of a local bank. He made a fraction of what he used to, but he whistled while he cooked. Elena was setting the table. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her hair was tied back in a simple ponytail. She looked younger, softer. Morning, Alice, she said, coming over to kiss my cheek. Did you sleep well? Like a baby, I said, sitting down. We waited for you, David said, bringing the platter of eggs to the table. He sat down and reached for Elena's hand, then extended his other hand to me. There was no hesitation, no embarrassment. "Who's praying today?" David asked. "I'll do it," Elena said softly. I watched my daughter-in-law bow her head. This was the woman who once treated the Bible like a contaminated object. Now she closed her eyes with reverence. "Dear Lord," she began, her voice steady. "Thank you for this food. Thank you for this roof, small as it is, because it is full of love. Thank you for saving us from ourselves." She squeezed David's hand. "And thank you for Grandma Alice, and for the shield of prayer that held us when we were falling. Amen." "Amen," David and I said in unison. We ate in peace. The radio played softly in the background. The sun streamed through the small window, lighting up the dust motes dancing in the air. We didn't have millions in the bank. We didn't have society friends. But as I looked at my son, laughing at something his wife said, and looked at the Bible sitting openly on the counter where anyone could see it, I knew we were richer than we had ever been. They had learned the lesson that takes some people a lifetime to grasp. You can build a castle with money, but you can only build a home with faith. And you never, ever silence the voice that is praying for your survival. My dears, life has a way of bringing us to our knees, either by choice or by force. David and Elena had to lose everything to find the one thing that mattered. But you don't have to wait for the storm to crash your house before you check the foundation. If this story touched your spirit, if it reminded you of the power of a praying mother or grandmother, or if you just need a little more of this old woman's wisdom in your life, please do me a kindness. Click that subscribe button right now. I want us to reach 1,000 subscribers so we can keep sharing these stories, keep spreading the light, and keep building this family together. Don't just listen, join us on the porch. Leave a comment below and tell me, who is the prayer warrior in your life? Until next time, keep your faith strong, keep your prayers loud, and remember, the shield only works if you hold it up. God bless you, child.